Arthur Torrington, Director of Windrush Foundation. Welcome to the show. And today we have Dr. Donald Palmer, who is going to talk to us and tell us all about what he's doing and maybe enlighten us on the sciences. Now, Donald, just give me a good background of the reasons for your, liking the sciences in the early days in South London.
Well, first of all, can I say, Arthur, thank you very much for inviting me to give an opportunity to tell you a bit about myself. So it really all starts back in South London, where I grew up. And it's really the encouragement of my parents. My dad was a bus conductor, and my mum was what referred to in those days as an auxiliary nurse.
An important job.
Yes, indeed. It may be something we can elaborate. And it was at school, so I went to Ernest Bevan School in South London, and I've always had a particular interest in science. I have to say, part of that interest came from when I was having to do a paper round, and I found it sort of quite boring. So I spent half the time putting papers in letterboxes and reading Marvel comic, and got really sort of excited about Spider-Man, Peter Parker. And Peter Parker wore glasses, and also Peter Parker was a scientist. So I just really sort of naturally warmed to that idea, but I really love science. At school, I just found that subject really fascinating. And what was really interesting at school, I'm of the age when there were two categories in terms of sort of post-16 qualifications. There was O-levels, and then there were CSEs.
That's right.
So I ended up in the middle band at school doing CSEs.
And not GCS?
No, I didn't do any O-levels.
And why?
Because at that time, most children, particularly one of colour, were kind of sort of banded and put into what they call sort of, lower grades or middle grades. And so what I found myself was doing CCSEs. The irony of it all is that in terms of the sciences that I did, you were in the same classroom as with the O-level kids. So you were taught the same material, but then when it came to the exams, large proportion did CSEs, and then the other did O-levels. But suffice to say, I got all grade ones in those subjects, which were equivalent to an O-level. And so, having done really well in sciences, I then decided to go to South London College in London Bridge, sorry, and ended up doing an ordinary national diploma in biomedical sciences. And I was really interested in that area. I managed to spend a small amount of time at King's College Hospital, Denmark Hill, where I met some scientists there, and I ended up studying sort of blood and serum, and I really enjoyed science. And so subsequently, I remember that then I said I wanted to go to university. I remember meeting some young people who were doing O&Ds, and I was deciding, well, actually I want to go to, sort of university. So think of O&Ds, all the national diplomas, as like the equivalent of your BTECs.
Yes, but still, it does still seem a bit lower than the other qualifications.
Yeah, definitely.
So
generally, my background in terms of those early studies weren't one akin to, in terms of going to university. So we're now talking at the early 80s, when I decided, no, I think I really want to go to university. But there was none of my peers who were going to uni. So I found the whole experience unsure of what it was like. But it was really speaking to one or two tutors. And then I remember thinking, looking at the courses and thinking, I'll go to Bradford.
Good.
Travelling all the way up north, I thought that'd be a really good experience. So I remember I went with my father. So my father and I went up to Bradford. We had relatives in Yorkshire, so we stayed in Huddersfield, and then we went to the university. And I found it quite an interesting experience. There were very few people of colour. But I really enjoyed the course and meeting. I remember there's one individual who ran the course, Professor Baker, I think he's now sadly passed away, really taking the time to talk to me as if he wanted me to make sure that I was happy and to attend. And fair enough, I got all distinctions in my ordinary national diploma, and then went to Bradford University, and really enjoyed my time at university. My father has often said, I went to university as a boy and then came back as a man.
That's good to know. So after university, then what were your challenges then?
So one of the challenges, what I found, when thinking about when I was thinking of university, was I realised that to a certain degree I was out of my depth with my peers. I found overall my peers were, really well read. Because you have to imagine, the school, I went to a comprehensive school, then I went to South London College. So while I was, scientifically, I was, had a really good level of knowledge, my overall general knowledge was quite poor. So one of the things I learned very early on when I was at university was the need to really have a broad-based education. So I spent the early years at university making sure, for example, I was starting to read literature. I remember reading broadsheet newspapers.
What about history?
Yeah, and just really making sure that I had, if anything, a general knowledge. So I was able then to converse and interact. And one of the things I found really fascinating with university was the fact that I was interacting and engaging with people from a wide background. And that really helped me. I met my best man there, and we are still friends to this day, godfather to my children. And it was really a case of discovering and interacting. One of the great things about the course was that it was referred to as a sandwich course. And those courses still exist, where you spent a year out on work placement. So I spent a year in Manchester, south of Manchester, a place called Macclesfield. And I worked for an organisation where the older audience may know, ICI. It's now called AstraZeneca, and I think it might have even changed its name since then. And that was a really wonderful experience in terms of engaging and interacting with researchers. So I'm like 2021, and actually interacting with scientists really cemented the idea that, yes, I want to be a scientist. And that was, spent a year there. I found it was really inspiring and thrilling.
What inspired your specialism, though? Because you specialize in
I specialize in immunology. So what happened then in my final year at university, I ended up studying an immunology module. And what fascinated me about the immune system is the body's ability to protect itself against, the so-called germs that are out there. And I found that really fascinating. The most important part, what I found fascinating, was this whole idea, the phenomena. I'm going into a bit of science.
Go on, now. I don't mind. I'm willing to learn.
is this idea of what's referred to as immune memory. And what I mean by immune memory is that if one has been infected by a bacteria or a virus, the immune system will develop protective mechanisms. But more importantly, the immune system will remember that interaction that took place. So if you encounter that germ, that virus again, your immune system will have remembered that and actually will fight it at a far greater and quicker rate. That I really found fascinating.
And then, but then in terms of fascinating, so what did you, how did you challenge that then, that particular interest?
So I then thought, what I really like to do, I started talking to various individuals, and I thought what I really wanted to do is to study this area further and to really get a sense of it. So after graduating, I came back to London, and then I worked at Imperial College. I worked at Hammersmith Hospital. I was part of the And then I actually did a master's in immunology, part-time, at King's College, London.
How many years you took for that?
So that was a one day a week for 2 years.
For two, okay.
Yeah, so I did a master's, which was, I found really great, because there I was able to really study the subject in real depth and greater understanding. And what was the best part about that program was the fact that in the second year was they would invite many of the top immunologists around the country.
Top being national?
Both, yeah, national, and if occasionally maybe international.
Okay.
I remember 1 or 2 Americans giving talks. And what was fascinating about that master's course was these top immunologists would give a talk about their own research. So the first year you'd covered all areas of immunology, but in the second year you'd have these top immunologists giving talks about their area of research. And there was one person in particular who I'd met previously, Professor Elizabeth Simpson, who's now an FRS. Those areas of research really fascinated me. So at the end, I asked her, you know, I'd like to do a PhD. You know, is there an opportunity in your laboratory? And I met her previously, and she said there might be. And once I'd finished my master's, and I got a call, and she said, look, there's a PhD on offer. Would you like to come for an interview? So I went for an interview, and I got that position. So I then did a PhD at...
Was that full-time or?
Yeah, that was full-time.
Okay.
So I ended up doing a PhD full-time.
And how many years? That 3 years?
So that was, yeah, 3.5 years.
Okay.
So I did a PhD in genetics and immunology.
Very good.
Which was, a PhD is really where you spend 3 years doing research. And it's, you know, generating your own data. It's knowledge generation.
But that particular research would be your own unique work.
Your own unique research. And from that, what you would do is you would then publish your work in a scientific peer-reviewed journal, and also you would then have the opportunity to present your work at both national and international meetings.
Okay. Now we come to the end, but I'm going to call you back for another discussion to talk to you about, you know, what you're doing now and about your sort of community interests, because I know that you're very, very involved. So thank you very much, Donald, and we just pass you back to Lavina.